The crowd roared as names were called, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. This was my moment. 4 years of sleepless nights, endless deadlines. And yet, my mother leaned close and whispered, "Stay humble. Don't try to make a scene." Her words hit harder than the summer heat pressing on my gown. I forced a smile, stepped toward the stage, and felt the weight of the speech in my pocket. Except it wasn't the same. Lines I'd written from my soul had been crossed out, replaced with words I'd never seen before. My mother's handwriting. My heart pounded. What was she hiding? I've always known I was different in my family. Not in the way people hope for, but in the way you feel when you're standing in a photograph and no one remembers you were there. My name is Emily Carter, 21 years old, a senior in communications at a state university, and somehow the invisible member of a family of 4. My grades are near perfect. My professors call me the voice of the debate team. Yet in my house, those victories fade like chalk in the rain. My younger brother, Josh, is the family's crown jewel. The local high school's football star, he's been the subject of hometown newspaper articles since he was 14. I still remember the day he got his first car at 16, a shiny black Mustang with a red bow, while I scraped together shifts at the campus coffee shop just to afford a monthly bus pass. At Christmas, Josh unwrapped a brand new gaming console and grinned as Dad high-fived him. I got a self-help book titled Stay Grounded. It'll help you keep perspective, Mom said, as if I needed reminding not to get ahead of myself. It wasn't that they ignored me outright. It was that their attention always seemed rationed, and I was never the one they chose to spend it on. Even my achievements were deflated before they could take flight. The week I won a state essay competition, Mom's only comment was, "That's nice, honey. Don't brag about it to Josh." One quiet Saturday night, I sat alone in my room, scrolling through old family videos on my laptop. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, graduations, moments that should have been warm. But in each clip, I noticed the same thing. My mother's eyes searching for Josh first, her smile widening when she found him. Even when I was the one blowing out candles, she was looking elsewhere. I paused one video and leaned back, trying to remember if I had just imagined it. That's when I noticed something strange in a still frame from a family barbecue. There I was, or rather, half of me. The photo had been cropped, my right side completely missing, leaving Josh perfectly centered with my parents. It was a small thing, maybe even unintentional, but it felt like confirmation of something I'd felt for years. A week later, I came home from class early and heard voices drifting from the kitchen. My mother's tone was low, edged with guilt. "I know I'm hurting her," she told my grandmother, "but I can't help it." "Emily's a good girl," Grandma replied, her voice heavy. "But favoritism leaves scars. You remember how it felt when your father ignored you?" I froze in the hallway, the weight of their words pressing on my chest. Favoritism. So it wasn't my imagination. That night, after my parents went to bed, I pulled out the old photo albums from the hall closet. Between the stiff pages and yellowed corners, I began piecing together a silent history. In the earliest photos, my mother looked different, lighter somehow, her eyes holding a spark I'd never seen in person. Then, buried in an envelope marked college years, I found clippings from a student newspaper. Mom, 20 years younger, on stage in front of a packed auditorium, captioned, "Linda Moore, wins state speech championship." I'd never known she'd been a public speaker. No one had ever mentioned it. Alongside the photos were neatly folded program booklets, each with her name printed in bold. But the trail stopped abruptly after her junior year. At the bottom of the box was a thin stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The paper smelled faintly of cedar. I untied it and scanned the first page, addressed to Linda in an unfamiliar hand. I think about the girl on that stage, fearless and radiant, and I can't believe you'd give it all up. But I understand why you had to hide, and why you have to hide her now. The signature was a man's name I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. I shuffled through the rest and found one sentence that made my hands tremble. I wish I could have been there when our daughter was born. I stared at the words until they blurred. Our daughter. Not your daughter with Michael. My father's name. Just our daughter. The implication was clear, and it struck like a blow. Trying to steady myself, I reached for something familiar, a book I'd been reading for my public speaking seminar, The Power of the Podium. I flipped open to a chapter on owning your truth and froze. The handwriting in the margins, notes about pacing and tone, matched the letters exactly. Every loop of the Y, every slant of the T. It was the same hand. The same man who'd written to my mother decades ago had written in this book. The man whose identity, it seemed, was woven into my own. I shut the book, pulse hammering in my ears, the unanswered questions piling higher than I could process. Whoever he wasn't just a name on a page. He was a part of me. And suddenly, the quiet life my mother had built, the silence around my accomplishments, even the whisper at graduation, all of it felt like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve. After that night with the letters, something shifted in me. I couldn't confront my mother, not yet, but I could control one thing, the way I showed up in the world. I threw myself into every opportunity I could find, the kind of relentless drive that leaves no room for doubt. When applications opened for the university's merit scholarship, I submitted mine with a portfolio of debate wins, volunteer work, and academic honors. 2 months later, my name was called at the awards banquet. My mother didn't come. She said Josh had an away game. I became president of the debate club, guiding nervous freshmen through their first rounds and leading the team to nationals. I stayed late after class to rehearse speeches alone in the empty lecture hall, my voice echoing off the cold walls. On campus, people noticed me. At home, the silence was unchanged. It started as an experiment, recording short speech tips on my phone and posting them to TikTok. To my surprise, people watched. At first, a few dozen views, then hundreds, then thousands. My videos weren't just tips. They were pieces of my life wrapped in lessons. Find your voice, I'd say into the camera, even if no one's listening yet. One evening, I opened my DMs to find a message from a high school girl named Sarah. I saw your video about speaking up in class. Yesterday, I told my dad he was wrong to ignore my little sister. I don't think I could have done that without you. I stared at the screen, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about me anymore. Then, without warning, the warmth was replaced by ice. A notification popped up, my phone buzzing with an unfamiliar link. It was a video of me, but not one I'd posted. I recognized the outfit, a green sweater from a practice session I'd recorded privately. The clip had been trimmed, my voice spliced to sound arrogant. The caption read, "Miss Perfect loves the sound of her own voice." I clicked the username. Nothing but a blank profile picture and the handle True Watcher. My stomach dropped. By the next morning, the video had been shared across campus. Some comments were supportive, but others were cruel, mocking my voice, my face, even the way I moved my hands when I spoke. That weekend, I came home to find my mother waiting in the living room, arms crossed. "So this is what you've been doing instead of studying?" she asked, holding up her phone with the leaked video, paused mid-frame. "You've put yourself in the middle of drama before graduation." "It's not what it looks like," I said, but my voice felt small. She shook her head. "I told you to stay humble. Now you're inviting trouble." The words stung more than the gossip. It was as if she'd been waiting for proof that I wasn't ready, that my voice was more liability than asset. Over the next week, sleep slipped through my fingers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that green sweater, heard the warped version of my own words. The speech I'd been preparing for graduation sat untouched on my desk. I thought about scrapping it entirely, keeping my head down like my mother wanted. Then one night my phone buzzed again. Another DM from True Watcher. "I know why your mother doesn't want you speaking in public. Meet me, and I'll tell you." I almost deleted it. But then a second message arrived with an image attached. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was my mother, younger but unmistakable, standing on a stage beside a tall man with a commanding smile. His arm was draped over her shoulders. They looked like winners at some public speaking event, both of them holding trophies. The caption beneath the photo read, "International Oratory Finals, 2001. I didn't recognize him until I zoomed in on the face. It was the same man from the letters, the same man whose handwriting matched the notes in my book. And now I couldn't ignore the truth. He was my father, not the man who'd raised me, but the one my mother had kept hidden. The room felt smaller, my breathing louder. If True Watcher knew this, what else did they know? And why were they pushing me toward it now, just weeks before the biggest speech of my life? The message from True Watcher included a location, a quiet cafe on the far edge of town. I almost didn't go. My mind spun with possibilities. A stalker, a scam, or worse. But curiosity had already gripped me by the throat. I needed answers. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and espresso. In the corner, a woman in her late 40s waved me over. "Emily?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. "I'm Claire, your mother's cousin." I slid into the booth, pulse thudding. "You sent the messages?" She nodded. "And the photo. I thought you should know before you go on stage, and the whole world sees you as just Linda Carter's daughter. You have another legacy." I braced myself as she told me the truth. My biological father was Daniel Hart, a celebrated public speaker who'd won international championships and built a career coaching others. My mother met him at a competition during her college years. They fell in love, but the relationship collapsed when he accepted an offer abroad. She found out she was pregnant after he left, and instead of telling him, or anyone, she married Michael Carter, the man I've always called Dad. Claire leaned forward. "You have his voice, Emily, his presence. It's why your mother fears the stage for you. She knows the price it cost her." The words hit harder than I expected. Shock pulsed through me. But so did something else. An odd, quiet pride. The man I'd admired through his books and speeches wasn't just an icon. He was part of me. That night I sat in my darkened kitchen, replaying every memory I had of my mother crying quietly over the sink, thinking no one could hear. I remembered the way she'd glance at me when I spoke in front of relatives. Her eyes clouded. Not with disapproval, but with something closer to fear. For the first time, I felt something tangled and complicated. Anger, yes, but also a strange compassion. Still, compassion didn't change the fact that I had a decision to make. I pulled my graduation speech from my desk drawer. Half of it was safe. Platitudes and thank yous my mother would approve of. The other half was raw, honest, and mine. I took a pen and began crossing out entire paragraphs, my hand shaking but steady in purpose. When I was done, the speech felt like a living thing, a part of my story I'd been hiding for too long. The next day, I approached Professor Hayes, a veteran in the communications department known for his tough critiques and brilliant coaching. "I need a mentor," I told him, "and I need to keep it quiet." We began meeting twice a week in his office after hours, the blinds drawn. Sometimes we rehearsed in the empty lecture hall, the sound of my voice echoing against the rows of seats. Other nights we streamed the sessions privately, allowing a small circle of trusted friends to give feedback. One evening, during a particularly impassioned run-through, one of those friends, an influencer with a modest but loyal following, asked if she could post a snippet of my practice. I hesitated but agreed as long as she left out any personal references. By the next morning, the clip had gone viral. The hashtag, or let her speak, exploded across social media, filled with people sharing their own stories of being silenced by family, school, or circumstance. That surge of energy should have been exhilarating, and in some ways it was, but with visibility came exposure. 2 days later, I got an email from the university's event coordinator. "We've had a request from Channel 7 to broadcast the entire graduation ceremony live." My first thought was panic. My second was realization. This was it. My voice, my story, broadcast far beyond the walls of the auditorium. When I told Professor Hayes, he simply said, "Then you'll be ready." But readiness wasn't my only concern. Late that afternoon, as I was leaving campus, I saw a familiar figure waiting by the main gate. My mother. Her posture was tight, her eyes sharp with a kind of resolve I recognized from every argument we'd ever had. "I heard about the live broadcast," she said, skipping any greeting. "It's not too late to step aside. They can find someone else, someone who won't embarrass the family." Her words landed like cold water, but beneath them, I sensed something more desperate. This wasn't just about my speech. It was about control. "I'm not stepping aside," I told her, though my voice trembled. Her jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." And with that, she walked away, leaving me with the unnerving feeling that she wasn't finished. Graduation morning smelled of cut grass and nerves. My name was printed on the program. Commencement speaker. Right above the line announcing the national broadcast, I could hear the murmur of the crowd from backstage, a sea of anticipation. My heart hammered in my chest, and that's when I felt a hand on my arm. My mother stood there, dressed in a pale blue dress that made her look younger, softer, but her eyes held the same steel. She leaned close so only I could hear. "Stay humble," she whispered, as if it were both advice and warning. I walked toward the podium, the weight of my rewritten speech in my hand. But as I looked out over the crowd, rows of faces, some smiling, some expectant, I felt the paper go cold between my fingers. I set it aside. The words I'd written no longer felt alive. My truth did. I began with a steady voice. "For as long as I can remember, I've been told to keep my head down, to not take up too much space, to let others shine." My eyes scanned the audience, not looking for approval, but connection. What no one tells you is that silence is not humility. It's erasure. I spoke about favoritism in families, about the quiet ways it can fracture a child's sense of worth. I didn't name names, but every syllable was carved from my own experience. "I just wanted to be seen," I said finally, and the words seemed to hang in the air like smoke. The crowd was still. No rustle of programs, no coughs. Just stillness, as if the entire stadium had stopped breathing. I let the silence settle before continuing. "And if you've ever felt invisible, I want you to know, you're not. Your story matters, your voice matters, and you never have to ask permission to use it. When I finished, the first sound was a single clap from somewhere near the front, then another. Then the whole place erupted. Students stood, caps tossed into the air, the applause swelling until it was almost a roar. The camera panned across the audience, and my eyes caught the feed on the giant screen behind me. There, in the front row, was my mother. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know if they were for me, or for the past she'd never spoken of. By the time I left the stage, my phone was already buzzing. Friends texting, "It's everywhere," and "You're trending." By nightfall, the hashtag #LetHerShine had climbed to the top of Twitter, with clips of my speech shared millions of times. People from around the world commented, telling me about their own moments of being silenced, and how my words gave them courage. My father, Michael, called that evening. "I'm proud of you, Em," he said simply. "Don't let anyone tell you to dim your light." My mother didn't call. When I saw her 2 days later, her voice was clipped. "You humiliated me in front of the entire town," she said, though her eyes avoided mine. "I told the truth," I replied. Her lips tightened. Some truths don't need to be public. I could have argued, but the viral wave was still cresting. It wasn't just online chatter. Media outlets began reaching out. Local radio wanted an interview. Then came the email from the Insight Hour, a nationally syndicated talk show. They wanted me and my mother on air, together. I assumed it was for a feel-good reconciliation segment, the kind that ended with a hug under soft lighting. But when the producer called to confirm, she mentioned the title, "When Family Turns on You," a live debate. It wasn't going to be about healing, it was going to be about conflict. I told my mother about the invitation, bracing for her refusal. Instead, she surprised me. "Fine," she said. "If they want to hear the whole story, they will." The day of the taping, we sat in the green room, the hum of cameras and chatter just beyond the curtain. My mother's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening, and stepped into the hallway to answer. I caught fragments, her voice low but urgent. "Yes, I understand. I'll make sure she hears it." When she came back, her face was unreadable. "Nothing important," she said, but the way she avoided my eyes told me otherwise. The stage manager called our names. As we walked toward the lights, I couldn't help but wonder, what had she just been told? And why did I feel like I was about to find out in front of millions of people? The days after the talk show invitation felt like walking through a storm. Loud, unpredictable, impossible to see more than a few steps ahead. I agreed to appear, not because I wanted to fight my mother in front of the world, but because I knew this conversation had been waiting for years. Still, I also knew that whatever was said on air would be permanent. In the middle of the chaos, I started therapy. My first session was in a sunlit office filled with the scent of chamomile tea. My therapist, Dr. Nguyen, asked me what I wanted out of our work together. I told her I wanted to stop feeling like I had to earn my right to exist. She nodded, and in that nod, I felt the first crack in the wall I'd built around myself. Week after week, I unpacked years of small wounds, the ignored victories, the silenced opinions, the way my mother's praise always felt conditional. But I also learned something unexpected. Healing didn't mean excusing what had happened, nor did it mean cutting ties completely. It meant building boundaries, strong enough to protect me, yet flexible enough to let in the good. While I was learning to breathe again, my mother was having her own awakening. She started receiving hundreds of messages from parents who had seen my speech. Many thanked her for raising a daughter brave enough to speak the truth. others admitted they recognized their own favoritism and were determined to change. One evening, she showed up at my apartment, unannounced, holding her phone. "I want you to see these," she said. She scrolled through messages, some long, some short, all heartfelt. "I didn't expect this," she admitted quietly. We ended up sitting on my couch watching the viral video of my graduation speech together. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I could feel her eyes flick toward me occasionally, as if weighing whether to break the silence. Finally, she said, "There's something you don't know about the day you were born." My breath caught. The tone in her voice wasn't defensive or angry. It was heavy, like carrying a box she'd kept sealed for decades. Before she could continue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her jaw tightening. "We'll talk about it," she said, standing up, "but not tonight." That night I barely slept, my mind spinning with what she might have meant. The following week, we flew together to New York for the talk show taping. The producers gave us separate dressing rooms, which felt both like a courtesy and a warning. I tried to steady my nerves, reminding myself of the breathing exercises Dr. Nguyen had taught me. When the cameras rolled, the host began by playing a clip of my speech. The audience applauded. My mother and I sat side by side under the glaring lights, a table of water glasses between us. The first question was directed at her. "Linda, how did it feel hearing your daughter speak so openly about favoritism?" She took a breath, her voice even. "It was painful," she admitted, "because I recognized myself in her words, and because I knew she was right." The host turned to me. "Emily, what do you hope comes from this conversation?" "I hope other families see that silence doesn't protect love. It corrodes it," I said. "Speaking up can be the first step toward healing, even if it's messy." Then came the moment I didn't expect. The host asked my mother if there was anything she wanted to share publicly for the first time. She glanced at me, her eyes wet, and nodded. "I want to tell the truth about Emily's father," she said, and the studio went still. "Michael is the man who raised her, but biologically, her father is Daniel Hart, a public speaker I met in college. I didn't tell her because I wanted to protect her from the chaos that fame brought into my life back then. But in doing so, I let my fear guide me. I tried to keep her from a path I once walked and loved." I sat frozen, the truth landing with both a sting and a strange sense of relief. I didn't need a DNA test to believe her. She wasn't finished. I used to dream of standing where she stands now. But when I couldn't, I told myself the dream was foolish. I see now that it wasn't foolish. It was mine, and I took it out on her without meaning to. The audience was silent for a beat before breaking into applause. After the show, I met with the producers to discuss a follow-up segment about turning pain into purpose. That night, in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and began drafting the outline for something I'd been quietly envisioning for months. A scholarship fund for students who had faced familial favoritism or neglect, but fought to pursue their goals. I called it the Equal Light Scholarship. Within weeks, donations poured in. From strangers, from former classmates, even from Josh. Each application I read was a reminder that my story was just one of many. A few days after the fund launched, my mother came over. She seemed lighter, though her eyes still held the weight of unspoken things. "I've been thinking about what you said on stage," she began. "And I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've done, but for refusing to disappear." We sat together in my kitchen, the late afternoon sun spilling across the table. She reached across, taking my hand. "Shine for both of us," she whispered. Her words caught me off guard, soft but steady. an offering and a plea at once. And for the first time I felt no bitterness in her touch, only a shared longing for something bigger than both our pasts. The months after the talk show felt different, as if some unspoken agreement had settled over my family. No one said, we're starting over. But the way we interacted began to change. My mother called to ask about my projects without slipping in reminders to stay humble. My father, Michael, started showing up to my events, even the smaller ones. And Josh, who had once been the center of every family photo, began inviting me into his spotlight, introducing me to his friends as my sister, the one who went viral. It wasn't perfect. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But there was a conscious effort now, an awareness in the way we celebrated each other's wins. We laughed more, and when we disagreed, we didn't let it stretch into weeks of cold silence. I kept my boundaries intact, understanding that love could coexist with self-protection. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself in a classroom at my alma mater, speaking to a group of communication students. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle, sunlight slanting through tall windows. "I'm not here to tell you to chase the spotlight," I said, scanning their eager faces. "I'm here to tell you that you don't need permission to stand in it." A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What if your family doesn't support you?" I smiled, remembering all the nights I'd asked myself the same question. "Then you build your own support system," I told her. "And sometimes, if you keep showing up, your family might surprise you." As I spoke, I felt the weight that had once been on my shoulders dissolve into something lighter, a sense of purpose that wasn't about proving myself anymore, but about helping others see themselves. By the following year, invitations poured in from universities, conferences, and even corporate events. I traveled to cities I'd only ever read about, standing in front of crowds from a few dozen to a few thousand. My book, Let Her Shine, became a bestseller, weaving my story with the stories of others who had overcome silence and favoritism. The hashtag, #ChaLetHerShine, transformed from a momentary trend into a movement. People all over the world used it to share their victories, big and small, in stepping into their own light. There were art exhibits, scholarship drives, and even a youth summit dedicated to amplifying voices that had been ignored for too long. One evening, while packing for a keynote in London, I got a notification. Josh had posted a video. I clicked play, expecting another sports highlight. Instead, it was him sitting on his porch, speaking directly to the camera. "For a long time," he began, "I didn't see what was happening in our family. I thought the attention I got was normal, that it didn't cost anyone anything. I was wrong. My sister taught me that when we lift someone up, we don't lose our own place. We make more room for everyone. So, thank you for opening my eyes." I replayed it twice before calling him. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." That night, as I zipped my suitcase, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The hidden letters, the long silences, the moments on stage when I spoke words I didn't know I had in me. It all led to this, a life where I could be both seen and see others, where shining wasn't selfish but shared. And as I boarded the plane the next morning, watching the sun break over the horizon, I whispered the words that had become my compass. Shining isn't arrogance. It's the right to live fully. And when we shine, we light the way for those who once feared the light.